So I'm Vanessa Walker. Back in 1981, my father had been the chair of the Humber Bridge Board, I think almost since its inception. So he'd chaired the board right through the construction phase of the Humber Bridge. In 1980, he'd been the Lord Mayor of Hull, because he was obviously a Hull City Councillor, and my mum, who was also a Hull City Councillor, was his Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lady Mayoress at the same time in 1981. Because the Lord Mayor is chosen on succession, it was my mother's turn to become Lord Mayor in 1981. So it just so happened that it coincided with the opening of the bridge and the Queen coming to open the bridge. So it was a real family affair in that my father was very instrumental in, helping with the organising of the opening of the bridge. My mother was Lord Mayor, so she was in her sort of civic duty. And when she was Lord Mayor, she appointed me to be her Lady Mayoress. So I was also there in a civic role. And it was decided that my little girl at the time, Rachel, who was 7, would be asked to present the bouquet of flowers at the opening of the bridge. So it was an absolute amazing family day out almost, but notwithstanding the importance that the bridge has on the economy and everything else, it was just a really good day out as well. Well, it was a July day, but it was surprisingly cold, the weather that day. And in fact, on the photographs, my mother's got this sort of quite heavy coat that she's wearing, with all her, Lord Mayoral chains. I braved the cold a bit because I'd bought a lovely new dress and I didn't want to spoil it by wearing a big heavy coat. So pride kept me warm. But the atmosphere on the bridge itself, because of course it was close to traffic on that day, I guess it was a bit of a carnival atmosphere with things going on and people who've been invited to, sitting in stands observing the opening. There were things that happened. I think it was the Archbishop of York was saying a prayer, and he wanted to say a bit more than his allocated time, and it meant that the red arrows were very finely tuned in terms of the time to do a flyover, and the last bit of his prayer was drowned out by the red arrows, so that was, there are little things like that you just remember. We had lunch the same day, but that was back at the Guildhall. And the dessert was strawberries, and the Queen said to my father, who I think was seated next to her, and she said, "Oh dear, my husband's allergic to strawberries." So, so there's this big flurry about getting the Duke and a different dessert and wondering why that hadn't been recognised when they were organising the planning of the menu. We had to have rehearsals before the bridge opening. The chief architect of the bridge, who was Sir Bernard Wex, was at the rehearsal, and he was having a little chat with Rachel, who was 7 at the time, and she told him, and he was a really tall man, lovely fellow, but so he bent right down to her height. And she told him, she said, we've built a Humber Bridge at school out of plasticine, but we put it on the windowsill and the sun came in and it melted it and it fell over. So Sir Bernard Wex said it very, very seriously to Rachel, "Well, I can assure you, Rachel, that wherever we've used plasticine in the construction of the Humber Bridge, we've put it in the shade." The memory of it, I think, stays in all our minds. Well, of course, my parents are no longer with us, but, right up until his death when he was nearly 100. You know, my father would still often talk about the legacy of the bridge, as well as, you know, the day of the opening of the bridge. But of course, Rachel and I remember it really well, and it's one of those very, very special moments that's etched in your lifelong memory. And, you know, it's a good story to dine out on and tell the story to friends and other people who might care to listen. But, you know, it was both, you know, interesting, but it was also really momentous and important for the area.